Welcome to Forbes Talks. Joining me now is Chase Peterson-Withorn, Deputy Editor here at Forbes. Chase, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, we've all been following the FTX story super closely. You have some exclusive reporting on it. But first, before we get to that, Sam Bankman-Fried has been in a series of high-profile media appearances this week. Can you give us a sense of what he said in those?
Yeah, so Sam Bankman-Fried has been sort of talking all throughout the collapse of this crypto empire, and this week he's really been talking. And so he was on Good Morning America. He had an appearance at a New York Times conference, and an article in New York Magazine came out that was an interview with him. And the gist of what he's basically said is, he messed up, and he messed up bad. But it was sort of an honest mistake. It's sort of a series of bad decisions and maybe some unclear accounting, things of that nature that have resulted in, tremendous losses for his customers and for his investors. But so far, he's sort of pushed back on the narrative that maybe he committed fraud, or he was knowingly trying to trade customers money and maybe or make off with their money.
And what has been the response to his claims of oops?
Yeah, it's been it's been sort of mixed. I think there's sort of two strains out there, two predominant strains, where one camp sort of sees it as maybe a couple of really notable people have come out and said that. Hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman said something along the lines of "call me crazy, but I believe the guy." And Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank was a paid spokesperson of FTX, and he came out and said sort of the same thing, which is I believe him. On the other side of the spectrum, there are a lot of angry people who say this whole thing has been a Ponzi scheme from the start, and you can't trust a word that comes out of his mouth.
I just want to get a sense of, is this normal for someone to be involved in this level of fraud, to be so vocal? I mean, he was tweeting about it, and now he's doing these series of really high-profile interviews.
Yeah, I would say that none of this is normal. I mean, crypto itself is sort of been a big change, and the way that he made his fortune and how quickly he made his fortune, none of that was normal. And part of what it has maybe been a little bit endearing to customers and investors and maybe regulators too, and sort of everybody, is that Sam Bankman-Fried wasn't normal. He was sort of you hear the stereotype of tech billionaires, tech people, wearing t-shirts and not wearing suits and things like that. But Sam Bankman-Fried was sort of a step farther, I guess. So it's never been normal. But the way that this all has blown up is not really normal. And certainly his response, to everything is not normal. I mean, he made a remark. They asked him about it at the New York Times conference, and whether his lawyers thought it was a good idea that he was speaking, and he said definitely not. And that's definitely when you get to this stage, most people start listening to their lawyers and start thinking about the criminal liability and whether they might end up in jail, whether they might end up mired in tons of civil lawsuits, let alone criminal trials. And Sam Bankman-Fried has sort of said, his explanation is, I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about ways that I can help. But whatever the motivations are, he's been out talking when pretty much nobody would advise that he goes out and talks. So definitely not normal.
Yeah, usually people would just opt for the no comment here, I think. But I do want to get into some specifics of what he is saying. So can you tell us his explanation for how both Alameda and FTX declared bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of pieces that are still sort of up in the air, and yet to be determined. And but the gist of it is that Sam Bankman-Fried had two major businesses, one of them being FTX, which was a cryptocurrency exchange, and there was a separate US arm of that business. And then he had a crypto hedge fund called Alameda Research, and it was sort of a hedge fund, sort of a trading firm, always a little bit secretive, never super clear what they were doing, and what the relationship between the two parties was. And for years, people have speculated about it and asked about it. And so So what ended up happening last month is both of them filed for bankruptcy. And I think, there are a lot of details that are yet to come out. And even the bankruptcy team that's going through and trying to figure this all out has said that they've never seen something that's such a mess before. And so they don't really have a good hold on it. I mean, from what it sounds like, FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried didn't even really know where all the money was at any given point in time. So it's really hard to figure out exactly what happened. But so far, the sort of the rough contour of it is that it seems that Alameda lost a lot of money making trades, making investments, things like that. And they had somehow managed to borrow money or were given money that were customer deposits from FTX to, sort of help paper over those losses. And the whole thing sort of fell down like a house of cards from there. And there have been sort of, the nuances of that will be what determines whether Sam Bankman-Fried ends up on trial or not. And things like that. So that's all sort of yet to come out. But the big gist of it is it looks like Alameda lost a lot of money, and there might have been some commingling of funds there where customers might be out their money that was sort of sent to try to prop up Alameda, as it failed.
Sam Bankman-Fried said he was only surface level involved in Alameda's finances, but you have exclusive reporting that proves otherwise. Can you expand?
Yeah, in his recent interviews, he's one of the big parts, his claim about Alameda losing money and all of that, the way that he's sort of started to sketch out an explanation for how he sees what happened is that Alameda basically took on a huge amount of leverage and using the FTX platform, and FTX didn't spot it didn't prevent them from taking on such debt, and so that sort of toppled, everything sort of came caving in. And so his explanation is sort of an explanation where he wasn't paying close enough attention, and he didn't want to be involved in Alameda because of the potential conflicts of interest, and that's not a business that he had been running for the last year or two and all of that. And I think it's clear that he was focusing a lot of his energy on FTX and maybe not very much energy on Alameda. I think that might be true, but a big part of his claim is that he didn't really have any idea what was going on at Alameda, and we really don't know how involved he was. I think that's all sort of yet to be determined and yet to come out, but I'm sure that it will. But what I found is in working on Forbes' net worth valuation of Sam Bankman-Fried over the last couple of years, I've been in contact with him, and over all this time, he was frequently sending us information on Alameda's holdings, some of Alameda's holdings, at least, what they were worth, how they were changing over time, and why. And so, in 2021, for example, he's telling us specifically, Alameda holds 3 billion and 14 million something tokens of this cryptocurrency, and they hold this many of this. And if the number went up or down, at one point he explained, well, we were buying some in the market and then we sold some, and so this is the result of that. And then he even explained a sort of complicated transaction where FTX bought out Binance, which is part of what led to this whole downfall. Sam Bankman-Fried's relationship with Binance, and explained how in detail how Alameda was involved in that, and how FTT tokens were involved in all of that. So he got really into the specifics, and as recently as just late August, I was having a conversation with him on this topic, and he was updating the prices and telling me how many shares, or how many tokens rather, of FTT, Solana, and Serum in particular, three big tokens that Alameda held a lot of. He was telling us how many he had, and what the market price of that was. So whether he was intimately aware of everything that Alameda was doing, certainly they were doing complicated transactions. They were doing a lot of derivatives, doing a lot of really complicated stuff. And what he was portraying, what he was telling Forbes about, was not those complicated things that Alameda seems to have been doing, and apparently taking on a ton of debt while doing it. So whether he was involved in all of that and knew that, it still sort of remains to be seen. But what we can say from the Forbes reporting is the idea that he didn't know anything that was going on in Alameda, or that he really wasn't aware. We have a few data points that show at least a baseline. He definitely knew how much FTT Alameda had. He definitely knew how much Solana and Serum, they had. And he definitely knew, at least last year, about specific trades that they were making and why and what the effects of that, sort of were. So sort of, we don't know everything, but this is, an important baseline to say, at the very least, he definitely must have known this because he was telling Forbes about it in an effort to help us, determine his net worth.
Yeah, from what you're describing from your reporting, that sounds more than surface level when you're sending that type of information to a company, right?
Yeah. I mean, you would think. I mean, we don't know the depths of what was going on below the surface. So who knows how deep he was really going and how deep it actually went. But he was a big shareholder. He owns 90% of Alameda. And he knew some intimate details, and he was still talking about them as of, just a couple of months ago. And, and I asked him for more information in August before all of this, all the troubles at Alameda and FTX broke and before everything came crashing down. We were asking him for a lot more detail on what exactly does Alameda own? What exactly, what debt is on Alameda's books? What debt do you owe personally? What debt does FTX owe? And, so we asked him about that information, and he said, I'm working on it and I'm looking into, specifically his coin holdings, and said it's in a lot of wallets, but I'm looking into it. And so if he did actually look into it, in August, he didn't get back to us, which, he's been doing a lot of talking and he typically is pretty talkative, but he didn't get back to us there. If he did look into it, does that mean that he found out some information about Alameda a month plus, before he is now claiming that he started to find out that information? I mean, it is definitely an interesting question.
Definitely. And Chase, you wrote in your most recent report, quote, most of the world's billionaires would rather not discuss their wealth, not Bankman-Fried. Why is he less tight-lipped than other billionaires you've worked with?
It's $1 billion question. I think that a big contributor to his rise, in the public sphere, is that he was always available. It wasn't just Forbes. I mean, he would pick up the phone and talk to all sorts of people. And he definitely gave the impression that you could ask him anything and that he would answer truthfully. And if he didn't really know something, he would sort of tell you. And so, I don't know. I mean, why would he talk about it? Is it because he was proud of the net worth that he had amassed? Maybe. Is it because he thought that it was good for his personal, public profile, and that was good for business? Maybe. I think it's really hard to say, but it is definitely true that he created a Google sheet for us and updated it, at least 5 times over the, since the beginning of 2021. There aren't a lot of billionaires on the list that are taking time out of their day to add new tabs to a Google sheet to show Forbes, how their net worth is changing and how much richer they're getting.
Right. So why are other billionaires more tight-lipped about their wealth, do you think?
I think that there are some who, even if they think it would be good for business, it's uncomfortable, or it's just not something that you want to talk about or flout. There are billionaires that are legitimately humble. Some who are just not inclined to talk about this, just in general. And I think that there are also a lot of billionaires who are very careful about paying attention to what their lawyers are telling them, or their tax attorneys, or something like that. And so most people wouldn't be talking in this moment like Sam Bankman-Fried is talking, and maybe in a similar fashion most people wouldn't be creating Google sheets of their net worth and sending them to the media in the way that Sam Bankman-Fried has. I think it's just I don't think we can get inside his head too much. It's hard to know why, but it is a notable difference, that's for sure.
Forbes has been tracking his net worth for a while. How has it changed from when Forbes started tracking it to now?
Yeah, so when we first came across Sam Bankman-Fried, he was still raising some of his early funds, he was raising some of his early funding rounds for FTX, and at the time was very quickly up and coming. And so we put him on the billionaires list. I believe we had a net worth of about 8 billion maybe for him at the beginning there. And very quickly it rose. I helped write a cover story on Sam Bankman-Fried just over a year ago now. And at the time, he was the fastest person to get as rich as he did, with the exception of Mark Zuckerberg. And so he was worth 22.5 billion at the time. And then shortly after we came out with that story, he raised another round of funding at an even higher valuation. And then at the beginning of 2022, FTX raised money at a $32 billion valuation, and his US operation raised at an $8 billion valuation. So a combined valuation of $40 billion for his businesses. And so, we had his net worth in the 20 billion plus range. And it was about there. It had dropped a little bit over the course of 2022 because crypto markets were down. But he was certainly worth 15 billion plus until all of this stuff came out. And now he says that he has about $100,000 in his bank account. And you have to think, with the legal bills incoming and the upkeep on the penthouse that he's living in right now, and whatever other expenses he has, you'd have to think that $100,000 is not going to last too much longer.
Is this fast rise and even harder and seemingly faster fall completely unprecedented?
Yeah, there aren't too many other examples of billionaires crashing so fast. There are some, but the speed at which he got up to maybe a quarter of $100 billion and went so quickly to zero overnight is pretty unprecedented. You're talking about some of the biggest billionaire scandals out there are the only really comparables, and I don't think any of them were worth what Sam Bankman-Fried was worth just before everything came tumbling down.
And you mentioned that he made his own Google tab. He was updating the Google Doc for you. What was your last correspondence with him? Or if not you, what was his last correspondence with Forbes?
Yeah, well, he's talking to a lot of people right now, so I don't know which of my colleagues are in contact with him at any given moment. But I've spoken to him since this happened. In fact, the day that everything was starting to go down, and things were really crashing in the middle of the storm, before they had filed for bankruptcy, he was still searching for emergency funding. They had been going through that Binance potential buyout. So this is the worst of the worst, and the point in time at which he was still in charge and could have, presumably was looking for things to do to turn things around. So in the middle of all of that, I sent him an email, a request for comment, saying that we were going to take him off the billionaires list, and we thought that it was unlikely that his assets were worth $1 billion or more. And he actually wrote back to me, and he said, I can't confidently dispute that my net worth is less than $1 billion right now. And so, and I think it was maybe the first public on the record comment that he had given, and he had gone dark for maybe 24 crucial hours, and had even recently had said to his investors in a letter that you might not be able to get a hold of me because I'm busy. And so around that time, there he was emailing me back to say, yeah, I'm probably not a billionaire right now, but I'm not sure. It just seemed like it was one of the least important things to to be dealing with that day, but he did get back to us on that. So, and you can see he's talking to all these people right now. So he certainly is not going dark.
Wow, a fascinating comment. Chase, thank you so much for your reporting, and I hope you come back soon. I'm sure there will be an update soon enough.
Yeah, it's a never-ending story, and there is a ton more to still come out. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Until next time.